it's not an exaggeration. I heard even Alan Shearer say it, that United could have been 6-0 up at half time. The game should have been won after 8 minutes.
Erik ten Hag has departed the Northwest and his Manchester United side hit 5 for Ruud van Nistelrooy. We're chatting about both of the Dutchmen, an emphatic Carabao Cup victory against Leicester at Old Trafford, the impending arrival of Mr. Ruben Amorim, and much, much more. It's episode 25 of the Theatre of Red. You are very welcome along to a rather unusual episode of the Theatre of Red, one in which a struggling Manchester United side has hit a Premier League opponent for 5. But that is simply a taste of the talking points in the Manchester United soap opera today, and I'm delighted to share some time with a good man for his second appearance on the show, Mr. Sam Pilger. How are you on this relatively sunny day, sir?
I am good. Yeah, I'm good. I was at the London Stadium on Sunday to witness that strange game. There was another strange game against Leicester last night as well. Ten Hag goes, Amorim will be arriving soon, maybe a little bit later than we first expected. So, as ever with Manchester United, I saw some City fans complaining that Rodri wins the Ballon d'Or and no one really cares. The story's more about Real Madrid not turning up in United, but it is incredible that the lack of Old Trafford remains virtually full, and the interest in United doesn't abate really. But that's great.
Yeah, but the best of respect, Sam, I think City fans will generally find something to complain about on a regular basis. Anyway, it's generally what they've done as long as I remember. But as you said, obviously there's quite a bit has happened since we last shared a cuppa. From the departure of Erik ten Hag to the majestic sight of a former fan favourite leading the side out under the lights at Old Trafford. And then, as you said, onto the news of the imminent arrival of Ruben Amorim. I think even though it's very difficult to try to pick one of them, there is only one place for us to begin, and that is with Erik ten Hag. Obviously, we discussed the Dutchman in great detail. He promised so much following his arrival from Ajax. We had the prospect of an offensive assault on domestic and European opposition. And then you fast forward 2.5 seasons with 2 trophies, the side in 14th position, and the 54-year-old is no more. Now, having spoken, you know me, I'm a football romantic, and that is truly at heart. And I do crave a return to the days of the longevity, as I've said, with Sir Matt and Sir Alex. But with 1 win in 8 fixtures and without a European win in a year, there wasn't a whole lot remaining in the corner to back him up running into West Ham, Sam.
No, there wasn't. And it's funny if you think, I mean, as I said before, I was at the London Stadium on Sunday, and I mean, it's not an exaggeration. I heard even Alan Shearer say it, that United could have been 6-0 up at half time. The game should have been won after 8 minutes. Garnacho had 2 chances, should have scored both. So it's that sliding doors moment to think, well, if they had been 4 or 5-0 up, we would have plodded on with Ten Hag, and we wouldn't have had the penalty and penalty or VAR controversy, and that would have been strange. I feel like we've been plodding on for a while now. I feel this season I hope we look back, but it feels like a bit of a waste, because I remember ahead of the cup final, people thinking, well, if he wins the cup final, and Wisehead said, well, surely Ineos won't make a decision about the manager on the basis of one game. And you thought, well, of course not. It's a whole season. It's all the research, everything. A game, anything can happen in a game. And they did. I mean, quite frankly, they did. There's no doubt about it. Ten Hag would have been sacked if they'd lost the cup final. He won it. And this has delivered us just more treading water for the last, since May, another 5-6 months of it. He was very, very lucky to get a third season. I can't think there's another major club in Europe that would tolerate their manager finishing 8th, even with a cup, 8th, Manchester United, 8th. And manager survives with a minus goal difference. I mean, it took some believing, but the joy and the emotion of the cup final against City sort of overtook it, and it just he was very lucky to get that. He was backed. He had new coaches come in. They tried to refresh it. They had the new structure around him, and they really did back him in the summer. I mean, maybe now we'll realise the folly of that. But 3 out of the 5 were either Dutch or had played for him before. I think the only ones that weren't his men were Yoro and Ugarte. So they really backed him. And yet he made it. It was a disaster. This season has been a disaster, and he really was given everything, lucky to survive, and messed up spectacularly. I mean, 8 goals in 9 Premier League games, 14th. United have scored more goals in the Carabao Cup than in the Premier League, and it's November tomorrow on Friday. I think it's been awful, and what a waste! What a waste! As a manager, here you are at Manchester United, you're given all you need, and he just absolutely wasted it. So I feel this time has been coming for weeks now. Probably the international broke. He should have gone before. He held on, and it was. Look, Manchester United have been in decline since March 2023. The Carabao Cup final, strangely, was seen to be that United's first trophy in 7 years or 6 years rather. That was the start. Win a trophy gives confidence. Here we go. And it's strange, we can pick apart the reasons why, but that was the beginning of the end. In fact, United immediately lost 7-0 to Liverpool. And since then, he just has not got it back, and it's been a slow, steady decline. And United just were, under him since then, just not a very good football team. They never dominated games. If they won, it was narrowly, sometimes undeserved. When they got beaten, they got beaten soundly. It's been... and yet he lives with 2 trophies. I think he can have no excuses whatsoever. He deserved to go.
Even for somebody like myself that was trying to take this glass half full approach and analyzing everything and trying to weigh up pros against cons, you get to a certain point where there's very, very little, if any, sort of ammunition that you can use and support. And it's very similar to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer in terms of trying to manifest reasoning as to why there could be any potential reason of this getting better. Eventually, you just get to a point where you say, look, a decision has to be made. Now, one of the few ways I haven't managed to get to this season was West Ham. And I did want to ask you when you were there, and I'm not going to spend too long on it because we have far too much to speak about with Manchester United. But what was the feeling in the stadium with yourself, with everyone around you, when that VAR decision was given, and then ultimately with what we know afterwards about how much of a horrific decision it actually was?
Well, I think, as in stadiums, it's the strange nature of football these days. You're the ones that haven't got a clue. Nobody knew, nobody thought anything in the area, and then suddenly it pops up on the screen, VAR review, and you think, and your just heart sinks because you're thinking, oh, hang on, the ball's just been in as a United fan, the ball's just been in our area. I had no idea what it was for. Nobody did. And then, of course, in the modern age, you just start scrolling through Twitter and thinking, well, what's happening? What is this? And it was given, yeah. And the outrage was uniform, really, because it was, we all follow fan accounts that get passionate and one-sided, but, sober, sensible voices, said it was an outrage as well. And, even obviously Dermot Gallagher, even on the Monday Sky review, and just, it was absolutely overwhelming. People who have no interest in United doing well just said that's a dreadful decision. So it felt the worst of VAR that Michael Oliver, sitting in an office block miles from the stadium, is pulling somebody back. It's for clear and obvious, and it wasn't a penalty. It didn't clear and obvious. It just, VAR wasn't invented for that, for someone to, and especially as it was the 90th minute, 1-1. It decided the game. Effectively, it decided Ten Hag's tenure. It was pretty dreadful. But United, I think. The thing is, I think why the Ten Hag sacking was a shock was because the outrage over the VAR decision was so great, it sort of overshadowed another United loss, another awful performance. Because as many chances were created, it's not of interest if they're not put away. I look back, another game I was at, Palace, the Crystal Palace game. I mean, that's almost a bit embarrassing now. That's talked about. That first half is talked about as one of the best halves of football. This was against a Crystal Palace side who hadn't won until a couple of days ago, and we're in the relegation zone, and that's the bar, And United didn't score. It wasn't 3-0. It was 0-0. It's the bar was set so low. So yeah, it sort of shielded him a bit. That's why the sacking, I think, was probably a bit of a shock.
Particularly when, as you drew upon, there was so many negative performances, so many moments where individuals felt, well, that's it, and this is the moment. And then eventually it's pulled off the back of what was about as an assured first half performance. As you know, the role of a coach is to set the team up to maximize their opportunities in possession and to limit the opposition when they are in possession of the football. He couldn't have done any more because he couldn't go out and put the ball in the back of the net. But that has led to the confirmation that Ruud van Nistelrooy would indeed then go full circle and take the reins on that interim basis, inevitably leading the side to that 5-2 Carabao Cup victory on Wednesday evening. Now, I'm sure you'll agree with me that there's something very, very special about an ex-legend walking out in Old Trafford to lead the team. And I don't think many wouldn't get excited about the prospect of Ruud, just as they did with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Like Solskjaer, he began with a 5-goal opener, and his celebrations were obviously, as I said at the time, they were befitting of somebody sitting in the Stretford end, which was fantastic. Before we dissect the game, how did it hit home to you with the length of time you're following the club, seeing that great man walk out in the theatre of dreams on Wednesday?
Yeah, well, it was wonderful. I mean, I was lucky enough. I interviewed Ruud van Nistelrooy when one of his first interviews in English football when he joined United in 2001, and enjoyed it very much. So that was he was just reeling from the departure of another Dutchman then in 2001. So this was obviously he got this position because Ten Hag left, but then this was Jaap Stam having just left, and that was his buddy. And I remember quite sweetly he sort of said, "Oh, Yap took me to the supermarket and he showed me what orange juice to buy and what to buy and how to get used to English life." And suddenly he was yanked away. But yeah, that was at the very start. And of course, I mean, 150 goals in 5 seasons. I often think in my greedy way, what a waste that actually Van Nistelrooy only won 1 Premier League title in those 5 seasons, which with 150 goals, he won a League Cup and he won an FA Cup as well. And so he had a good collection of trophies when he left. Certainly earlier generations in the 80s would be jealous of it. But yeah, I would. That was the thing with Van Nistelrooy. I always thought, God, all those goals only produced one title in 2003. Yeah, so I think in terms of an actual goal scorer, if those sort of questions, if your life depended on it, who would you want in a one-on-one? Van Nistelrooy. So to see him walking out, I mean, it's funny though. You say, I mean, if you think though, we've actually had Ryan Giggs, Michael Carrick, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and now Ruud van Nistelrooy is getting, and all club legends and all fantastic players. It's now that's the 4th time it's happened. So yeah, it was nice, and I think everyone feels warmly about Ruud. I'm glad the club. It looks like Ruud might be managed for another 3 games, but I'm glad the club resisted the thing that happened, with Solskjaer a few years back. So it'd be interesting to see how he did. I mean, Giggs did okay. Solskjaer obviously got the job. Carrick did okay. So yeah, hopefully there's enough there, and the good feeling from Wednesday carries on.
I don't know who it was, but I saw a tweet, I think halfway during the game yesterday evening, where it said that United have inadvertently come across the secret to success. Just bring in one of Fergie's players, allow him to stay there for 2 or 3 weeks, and then recycle and bring somebody else in and just repeat the process every month.
Yeah.
It's no, it was a fantastic sight. It was a breath of fresh air to be able to see the ball hitting the back of the net at least more than once in what was a very Fergie-esque type of game where it was back to front. And even though it was a largely rotated Leicester City side, it was very predictable that we were going to see an irregular onslaught on the opposition net following that inevitable new manager bounce.
Yeah, but it was a strange game. It was a very strange game.
Wasn't it?
It just had a weird feel about it. It was just like a playground game. It was kids in the playground, back and forth, back and forth. United scored 5, but could have had 7, 8, 9, and only United could manage to be 4-1 up and still a bit nervy. They got it back to 4-2 and then pulled away again. it was a very strange game, all the sort of cliches, all unshackled after Ten Hag and so on. But yeah, it was a rotated Leicester side. It was Carabao Cup, which I think is important. It's important to United. It's an opportunity to win a trophy now in the quarterfinals. Yeah, I mean, obviously Chelsea at the weekend will be a lot more difficult. But 5 goals. I was rather rather hoping we might get onto it. I was rather sort of selfishly hoping that a Xerxes, a Hoyland, a Rashford would score. A sort of Casemiro getting two and that sort of thing. I just thought the goal scorers need to start scoring goals, and this would be an opportunity to give them a bit of confidence. But anyway, that's greedy. A 5-2 win was welcomed.
It's not greedy because it's exactly what I was thinking. I was largely focusing on Joshua Zirkzee. I was
Yeah.
thinking this is an ideal opportunity for him to really get a bit of that monkey off his back. It's gone kind of opposite for Zirkzee because he started out and came off the bench, obviously, for his debut against Fulham and hit the winner. And you're thinking, well, this is utterly ideal. That it's almost a polar opposite to Rasmus Højlund, who had multiple opportunities and was just so unfortunate. You think back to the goal against Brighton, it never was because the ball was marginally over the line with Rashford when it was cut back. Xerxes arrives. He's coming in as the Serie A Young Player of the Year, scores the winner against Fulham on his opener. And I think a lot of people forget because he's such a big guy, he's such a strong guy. They forget that he's very, very young. Like, he's only after turning 23, Sam. He's a young guy and his entire world has been uprooted. And as I've said to somebody in one of the recent episodes on the show, no Manchester United player is really afforded any sort of time to acclimatise. And it's not necessarily just acclimatizing to a new team. It's acclimatizing to a new league, a new way of life, a new culture, a new lifestyle. And he's never afforded it. And ultimately, he can go out and he can play for 60 minutes over the course of 2 appearances, not necessarily pull up roots. And then he's labelled a failure. And that sort of stuff buys into these younger generations, because to think that he's not embedded in social media at 23 years of age, it's just ludicrous. That said, I don't think he walked off the field feeling terrible about himself. I'm sure he would have wanted to score a goal, but he put in a good shift. He linked play very well. I thought Rashford not necessarily lit up anything, but he didn't play poor and he was involved in the game quite a bit. Højlund obviously didn't get ample time. He came off the bench and really proved very powersome with his marauding runs and his ability to link play. And there was an abundance of notable performances across the field. Obviously, Casemiro with his brace was fantastic. Bruno Fernandes the same, especially with his second goal to round the keeper with such Cantona-esque cavalier ability about him. But I think that the standout was Manuel Ugarte. And it's probably easier to count the blades of grass that he didn't cover as opposed to what he did. I know that we were looking at a Leicester side that had 9 changes from the weekend defeat to Forest, but how impressive was the Uruguayan in what is really only his second or third start for the club?
Well, yes, no, I mean it was impressive. I mean, I think we understand he's certainly not a goal threat. He's not a particularly creative player, but he breaks play down. He intercepts and he covers a lot of ground. He's got energy, and I think strange how football happens, but I think the manager to get the best out of him and turn him into a £50 million player that PSG wanted to buy is about to come through the front door of Old Trafford. So I think it's funny how football turns out, but I think that could really do the best for him. I mean, clearly, it didn't happen when Ten Hag arrived and Donny van de Beek, but that's a different matter. I mean, it's not to say guarantee where anything will happen, but he played for Amarim only, a season and 3 months ago. It was really recently. So, and that's where he really made the major clubs in Europe sit up. So I think he'll be obviously delighted. He'll be delighted. There was a strange dynamic there with Ten Hag. I mean, I don't think Ten Hag was his buy. I think this was a buy the structure recommended. He obviously signed off on. I think he would have preferred to keep Amrabat, Sofiane Amrabat. I don't think he wanted to sell McTominay. But this is he wasn't keen, and it was strange the way he spoke about him. That he'd need time. He played very well against Fenerbahce. I thought he played very well. That block was worth a goal. I mean, that was incredible, that block. And then was dropped for West Ham. So this will. I don't think Manuel Ugarte will be. I think he'll be delighted. Obviously, probably didn't have a problem with Ten Hag, but his former manager who made him a star is coming through the door. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
You stole a march on me there because I was going to bring that up, and it was how I was going to ingeniously link everything to Mr. Amarim coming in. But you made mention previously about the signings that came in the summer after Ten Hag was backed, and how they were either Dutch or they had some form of link to him. That was the biggest standout because obviously we have this new structure. We have a manager that's going to converse with his hierarchy to be able to install a framework where these players come into the football club that suit the balance of what we're trying to achieve and moving forward. And I think it was one of the most obvious things to anybody who was witnessing it that Ten Hag was not very keen on this player, regardless of the amount of money that was spent. And you mentioned McTominay, you mentioned Amrabat. Like McTominay was specifically sold to fund the move for Ugarte to come to the club. So that in one sense, you've got the manager expressing a desire to keep the player. And you also, as per the Athletic, I think on, was it Wednesday morning or Tuesday morning, stated that Amrabat was someone that he had longed to keep on a permanent basis,
Yes.
and that was
Yes.
rejected. So
Yeah.
you'd wonder, as bizarre as all of this is, following that end of season review when Ten Hag was inevitably kept, how many eyes were peering at Lisbon at that moment in time? Because this is a footballer who excels so much under Ruben Amorim in Portugal, and he earned that move to PSG. French media immediately labelled him a revelation as an individual who was able to gel together a bunch of prima donnas, let's say it for what it is, in that Paris dressing room. And it's not too often that French media will come out and class any player as a revelation, particularly when he's only there a handful of months and he doesn't even speak the language properly. But all said, and everything there obviously does bode well for the arrival of his former boss in Amorim. Now, as we chat right now, the Portuguese appears to be a matter of formalities from confirmation. I think it's largely circulating around approximately 5 of his coaching staff and a suitable severance package to bring him and 5 of his coaches to Manchester. But it's evidently clear that Manchester United want their man. You've got Omar Barada and you've got Dan Ashworth. They've spent significant time in Lisbon trying to get this done. They've agreed to shell out the €10 million release clause. From reports, an additional €1 million to alleviate a 30-day sort of grace period. We're looking at a guy who has revolutionised football in Lisbon. 19 seasons he bridged that gap between Benfica and Porto to bring domestic title back to Sporting Lisbon. And in the space of 4 seasons, he's got 2 domestic titles, 2 domestic cups, which are more or less the equivalent to the League Cup, and some of the most innovative football that Portugal has seen in many years. And I think the real interesting fact with it is it's focused around a back 3 dynamic. And you're talking about a back 3 dynamic that works in unison with smooth transitional football from goalkeeper to defender to a midfield 4.
I'd be interested to know. I don't know at this stage why he wasn't more in the mix in the summer, because the names in the summer were really uninspiring. All good managers, and De Zerbi and Frank and Marco Silva, but there was a lot of Gareth Southgate and Graham Potter. It didn't, and that was largely why Ten Hag survived, because obviously they didn't capture the imagination of and United spoke to 5 or 6 people. I mean, Ten Hag was a dead man walking through then. They advertised for his job. But I find that as soon as I heard the news, I was excited, because we don't know how it's going to go. He's only managed, he's young. People say the new Jose Mourinho. And you think, of course, Mourinho had only managed in Portugal and came and revolutionized European football in Chelsea and Real Madrid and Inter Milan. But there's been another new Jose Mourinho since, and André Villas-Boas, who had a mediocre career and didn't reach Mourinho's height. So you've got to be careful of that. You just don't know. You just don't know. But it's exciting. It's exciting. I think those names I just mentioned in the summer left everybody a bit cold, to the extent that we thought, let's stick with Ten Hag then. And I think he excites, as you say, the football he plays, what he's achieved in Portugal, the players he's produced that have come to the Premier League and other leagues, the money he's made. There's an excitement there, and also, frankly, and unfortunate, it was only 2 weeks ago that Hugo Viana coming to Manchester City was like, well, that's Amorim. He's lined up to replace Guardiola whenever he decides to go. Liverpool considered him last summer. I don't know why that didn't happen. They went with Slot in the end. Strangely, he held talks with West Ham, and West Ham could not believe their luck. And people were like, "Hang on, are we serious?" He had admitted it was a mistake, quite wisely, and stayed in Portugal. I think. I mean, my biggest concern was it was like we'd been here before when twice when Solskjaer was sacked. Sorry, not Solskjaer was sacked. When Mourinho was sacked, Solskjaer was brought in because United couldn't get Pochettino out of Tottenham in the middle of the season. So it was like, okay, well, let's get this. Let's get that was the plan. That was the plan. Solskjaer for 6 months and then Pochettino. Well, Solskjaer did far better than anyone could have expected. And then it happened again with when Solskjaer was sacked and Rangnick was brought in because he couldn't get Ten Hag out of Ajax mid-season. And I thought the same thing was going to happen again. I thought, oh, here we go again. What an interim and treading water. The fact that we can get such an exciting young coach out of a major team, Sporting Lisbon, in October, is only a good thing. And I do feel we've beaten City. I mean, we haven't beaten City to it because obviously they've got Guardiola. There was, and I think he's a smart man. He's not going to say, well, just stay in place. Maybe we'll be back in a year or two. He's got this opportunity. And United are a bigger club, of course. And also, what can you do at City after Guardiola? Just win again. I think at United he's got the opportunity to build something new. So I'm excited by it, but it's got huge pitfalls as well. As I mentioned, Young hasn't managed out of Portugal before, but I'm really delighted. I wondered where they would go. I mean, even in the hours afterwards, and the Manchester Evening News, Samuel Luckers, had a credible source saying that Solskjaer was back in the running, and I just thought, we were worried about Southgate. So this is incredible. This is exciting, and he's coming soon. So I think it can only be a good thing, but let's wait and see.
You've comprehensively covered that across the board there. I'm trying to set a sort of a reasonable response to anybody that I'm engaging with on social media about this. And one of the ways that I set out about doing it was I said, yes, this is a fantastic young manager that really ticks my romanticism box, that this is a guy who can come in at 39 years of age and could potentially be here for 20 years. But at the same time, he's done exceptionally well in a league that, let's face it, does not have the same caliber of competition that he's going to be facing in the Premier League. Very similar to Ten Hag when he was in the Eredivisie. I sort of rounded it off by looking at how both managers were doing at the point when Manchester United were pursuing them. And Ten Hag was in around 73% of a win ratio with multiple domestic titles and that memorable run to within a kick of a ball in stoppage time to being in a Champions League final. And then you look at Ruben Amorim, who's also at 71, 72% domestically, has returned Sporting into the mix and surpassed what Benfica and Porto were doing. But we don't quite know how he's going to do outside of that. And then when you look at the sample size of how he's doing in continental football for the last 4 years, been okay. But you're looking at last 16 sort of entrance. And I'm totally behind him. The fact that we have moved, as you said, to get him at this time maybe suggests that the club are trying to do their very, very best to ensure that he doesn't go elsewhere. Maybe it's a case of let's get him now. Let's not allow anything to occur over the next few months that might sway his opinion and go somewhere else. And let's just get him in and let's do it, because so many people have forgotten that despite the fact that the season is, 9 games old at this stage, we're the same distance from the relegation zone as we are to the top 4, which is terrifying. And it's only 7 points. So you can make that back in 3 games. Now, there's massive opportunity for this still to be a successful season because nobody in their right mind, Sam, thought Manchester United were going to be challenging for the title this year. So if United can progress, put together a bit of momentum and a bit of a winning structure and a sense of good vibes around the club, then anything is possible this season, particularly when you're still one of the favourite clubs in the Europa League, despite 3 draws from 3. There's one question I want to ask you as well, because this is something that I find very, very curious from all the information that we have had since June when Sir Jim Ratcliffe spoke with Bloomberg. You've covered Manchester United far longer than I have. And one of the largest things that has come to fruition is that Ratcliffe and his hierarchy that he has installed want to initiate and to balance this framework within Manchester United where there is a set way that is considered the Manchester United way. If you get into a position where you're then utilizing succession planning and you have managers coming on a 3-4 year basis, as is the case with many of these European powerhouses, that they don't have to come in and reshape and remodel the entire football club. They're essentially entering into an environment that has a pre-existing structure and is there to continue and maybe just tweak a little bit to their own liking. The one thing that he brings that is a complete anomaly to Manchester United is that three at the back that he has run through for 4 seasons. This is something Manchester United do not typically and have not encountered upon. And as you know as well as I do, the success and the legacy of this great football club is built out of marauding fullbacks. Really, really wide, touchline hugging wingers, cutting in, crossing, and this essential attack mentality. In bringing 3 into the defence, you're essentially going to be losing out on one of your attacking midfielders because you're utilising fullbacks also. How do you feel that Ineos are going to factor that structure into their Man United way of thinking, if indeed you are looking at a situation 4 or 5 years down the line where somebody else could potentially be coming in?
Well, I suppose, a Manchester United way of thinking, they just want a successful way of thinking. And, you can't continue the same approach that might, that in the club's DNA, you have to try something different. That's why we are trying something different. A 39-year-old Portuguese coach. Yeah, I mean, that is the thing that jumped out at me as well. Three at the back. That was Conte with his Chelsea side. They played 3-4-3 very successfully. So, I think immediately you're thinking, well, who's playing on the left? I don't think we have a natural left wing back. Clearly, the sad news this week again of Luke Shaw being held up again. Will we ever see him at his absolute best again? Probably not, but I hope so. He's not that old, but it just doesn't look good, does it? So I think, we'd certainly need to enter the market. Malacia, that's again another bit of a sad situation. Who knows what will happen there? On the right, Mazraoui and Dallo. Obviously, I think the thing is, in terms of a way, I think it is about coaching, because I really feel the main thing is that struck me is that this team just, that whole sort of flippant line. Well, what do they do every week? It doesn't look like they do anything every week. What are they doing in training? And that was the point. They just didn't look like under Ten Hag. They didn't look like a coach side. They just wide open midfield. They just had no cohesion, no plan. He talked about a model. What was the model? And so I feel that once we can see something more defined, and that's coached, because these are very good players. I don't think there's a hopeless player amongst them. I don't think there's is there anyone? Oh, he's rubbish. Okay, there isn't. They're all very good players. They're Champions League winners. There's a World Cup winner. They're all internationals. Mainu, Garnacho, Højlund. There's hugely talented young players that any manager would want to work with, and yet so they need somebody to coach them. We don't know yet. There's talk of Amorim, in the first time in United's history, being a head coach rather than a manager. They just need to be coached, and I feel that he will bring that. He's got his coaching chops. He's proved that. Sport Lisbon are doing better than United this season, but I think overall the caliber and the background of United's players is stronger and better. Interestingly, I saw something that Bruno. You think, oh, Portuguese, he'll get the best out of them. Bruno Fernandes might be a casualty or have difficulty fitting into the 3-4-3, which he will play. I don't think he's going to turn up and play something else. It's what he's based his success on. It'd be a surprise if he came in and tweaked it. And that was rather the thing with Ten Hag as well. We never got close to the football from Ajax, and he dismissively said, well, I can't play like that. And which felt even stranger because he was trying to, the Ajax 2019 reunion team and or from his players, just bringing them all back. Even Amrabat was from Utrecht, and Mason Mount was because of how he did in the Netherlands. God, it was a bit one track. But yeah, we never saw that Ajax. I think I look forward to fresh ideas and these players being coached.
I've been a massive advocate for so long to return to a 4-4-2 with two men up top, or to stick three men in the back, just something that's different. Just a bit of innovation and a bit of differentiation to shake up the likes of Pep Guardiola and everybody else that's insisting on using the same type of tactics. And like you, I cannot see him changing his philosophy coming in. You referenced Ten Hag. I think we got two games, the opening two games of his tenure. And obviously, it was a 4-0 defeat and a 2-1 defeat. And all of a sudden, we're going to abolish our way of thinking and we're going to just utilize something entirely different. And I can't see that happening. I think there's going to be patience allowed, and people need to realize, and this is the firm thing that I've been getting across on social media, just because he's doing well with Sporting Lisbon and has turned around their fortunes doesn't mean it's going to be an immediate success with this football team. Like you, though, Sam, I do agree. The squad is absolutely jam-packed with talent. And
Yeah,
one of the largest sort of talking points for weeks, for months, is where are the goals going to come from? Well, last night was a clear example that goals can come from everywhere. Even when Casemiro is pinging them in from 30 yards out into the top right corner, the goals are there, the talent is there, and it's just a case of having a philosophy that the entire squad buys into and that you have a happy team. That leads us on to one final thing. Chelsea, Sunday. Very similar to another one of the ex-players that we had in Michael Carrick. I believe it was his second game in charge as interim manager. He beat Arsenal in his first game and then played
that's
Chelsea in his second. And I believe they drew 0-0, didn't they?
yeah. He didn't lose, did he, Carrick? So
He didn't lose. No.
no,
I think he
but
beat
yes, that was,
Arsenal and then he drew with Chelsea. So Van Nistelrooy
that's
has an
right.
opportunity now. He's had Leicester in the Cup. He's got Chelsea at home. Then he's got PAOK at home. And then he finishes off with Leicester in the Premier League at home. How do you see Sunday going against Chelsea? Two Jekyll and Hyde monsters going head to head with one another.
Well, I noted obviously Chelsea lost this week to Newcastle. That's no bad thing. The game's at home, which will help. Obviously, got to watch out for Cole Palmer as a fantastic player. Yeah, you've got to hope that all those cliches, all the smiles were back on their faces, and they scored 5 goals after. I mean, yeah, that's more than half of their Premier League total this year. So you hope they'll go in there with confidence. They have to, and I think as well, that they know now that the new manager bounce. He hasn't arrived yet, but they know Amorim, once it's announced, will be getting the tapes, will be looking, and they'll want to be flying. And they all have to start proving themselves again. That's the exciting thing. There's no favourites. There's no, oh, he bought me, I'm his man. People like Mason Mount. I know it's bizarre. He doesn't even feel like a Manchester United player. It didn't feel like that when we signed him, and it still doesn't feel like that now. He's barely been appeared. But these players will just have to prove themselves again. It's not, it's not about reputations. It's about how they can fit into Amorim's system and how they perform on the training field. But yeah, I mean, just talking about goals. I mean, I do think if you look back at the Ten Hag era, and this is the club around him as well, it's really strange that the club were crying out for goals, and we have spent over £100 million on Højlund and Xerxes, who just are young, inexperienced players. And Højlund had a good, I think it was 16 goals in the end, a good solid first season. But Xerxes got 1 in 14 or 15, and it just seems so much money spent on so. I have to admit, Ollie Watkins was suggested as a target last season, and my misplaced arrogance laughed it off. Ollie Watkins, come on, this is Manchester United. Well, I was wrong, and I just think a player with some Premier League nous would have been a far smarter investment than what we've seen. And I feel Ten Hag has to take responsibility for that. He signed off on these signings, particularly Højlund, and you look back and you think, the decision not to go for Harry Kane, which was such an obvious one, and it was when we were on a high, would finish third, that you could have got Kane, and you think, I spent about 140 million on Mason Mount and Anthony. You just think so much money has been thrown away. If we'd spent it more wisely there. So yeah, I do feel it was, the goals were shared around yesterday, but we do need somebody to step up and start scoring regularly. I think I saw a stat last night that Garnacho has the same goal contributions, goals and assists as Kylian Mbappe this season. So it's nice to see him score again. He should have. I mean, he should have scored twice on against West Ham. He should have scored twice against Crystal Palace. So I think there's a. Let's hope he could contribute 20 goals or so. So yeah, I mean, let's hope the momentum continues.
Absolutely. And I think Garnacho is, I could be incorrect with this, but I think it's something like 10 goal contributions in 15 appearances this season, which is
Yeah,
a splendid return for a young guy. And I suppose just adding off on one final thing on what you said there, the obvious move to make. I'm all for bringing in Rasmus Højlund because he's young and he's for the future, but you had to bring a veteran striker in alongside him. And it was one of the most foolish bits of transfer activity that they didn't, that instead you're just plunking all of the hopes and wills and wants and desires of the football club on a 20-year-old shoulders and an injured Anthony Martial alongside him.
yeah, no, yeah, no, no, yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree. I was just going to say the irony of it is that there was talk of getting Kane and Højlund, and
Yeah,
that Højlund was the apprentice that would learn under him for a couple of years. Kane, who's obviously in the later stage of his career, but we and we ended up spending 72 million on this apprentice, and yeah, with Martial, and but we're not much better this year, Højlund and Xerxes, and yeah, we're struggling there for goals, but yeah, Leicester was a good start, and let's carry it on.
yeah. Well, hopefully you have that old cliche that you have a squad of players ready and willing to go out and perform and fight for their future under the new manager. That would be absolutely fantastic. And to get one over on Chelsea would be a great, great return for Ruud van Nistelrooy as well. Will you make the game, Sam? Are you going to go to it, or what have you got coming up over the next coming weeks?
No, I'm not at that. I won't be at Old Trafford on Sunday. No, I've got some games coming up, but yeah, not that one. Yeah, so but no, I look forward to watching it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And as always, a pleasure chatting with you. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, Sam, and they didn't hear our chat the last time, how can they get in touch?
I'm just on Twitter. Yeah, if anybody wants to get in touch, yeah, I'm there to chat with or to throw abuse at. Not too much abuse, please, but yeah. I don't think my views are ever that outrageous, but I'll let the listeners be a judge of that.
Oh, there's no such thing as bad publicity, Sam, is there?
No,
And
absolutely.
on the topic of publicity, if you would like to keep up with the Theatre of Red, you can follow us on every single social platform at theatre_of_red. If you're still here, you might subscribe to the podcast and you can even leave a review, because every single one of those helps to generate a larger footprint of the podcast and give us that little bit more traction. Thanks very much for tuning in today. I hope you've enjoyed the weekend, and hopefully it's a win against Chelsea and we're speaking about all positives next week.